just dug out a nice piece of alder, which will do for the guitar Ace has been banging on about. Chose the best face for the back because the top face is mostly going to be a resin plate. Marked out the outline with a nice thick 4B pencil, and I'll cut this now on the bandsaw, keeping just outside the pencil line. Bandsaw complete with dust extraction. Hopefully next week we'll have a new saw and things will be much better. That's it, cut roughly to shape. I'll take any odd bits off, like this sharp corner on the drum sander, and put the template back on the top and route it to the exact shape on the router table. I use a bit of double-sided tape on the template to hold it to the body, and I'll also put a couple of screws in the top of the template just to stop any chance of the tape creeping while it's been used, while the template's been used on the router table. Should go without saying the screws are located where they're not going to cause any problems down the line. Sometimes it's a good idea to clamp up the template against the body where the double-sided tape's fitted, because even though the whole thing seems to be flat, it doesn't always stick and you'll always get one side popping up. All set to go on the router table. Body's all nicely trimmed now on the router table, so I just need to accurately mark the centre lines both ways, and then I can remove the acrylic template. I need to ask Asa who that old fat bloke is he has impersonating me on all the other videos he does. He doesn't know anything about this particular one. It's going to be a surprise for him. The centre lines on the template are ground in to the face of the template. So we do it on the edges and then across the front and the back. So only got a small amount of double-sided tape on, but it really sticks. It's a good idea to clean your templates regularly with a bit of lighter fluid, because any tape residue can end up causing issues. Before I accurately line up the template and put the dowel pins in, I'm going to drill out the neck pocket just mark it roughly, and that material will be removed on the pillar drill to a depth of about 15 mil, something like that, and then it'll be finished off with a router when the template's been accurately fitted. So neck pocket roughly drilled out. Get our brad point dowels. drill those in on the pillar drill now, and that gives me my 2 points of reference if I need to be putting any of the templates back on. So there's the body with the dowels drilled in, neck pocket partially drilled out. I'm going to route that now and then take this template off. Neck pocket done. This is just a spare neck from an old guitar. It's reasonably tight, which is great. Now comes the tricky bit, or the longer bit. I need to decide how I'm going to design this now, because the idea is to have a big inset resin panel, probably with this top third being retained in natural wood. So I want a line down there parallel to my centre line. I've just got to decide on the offset. Couple of bridge options. Got this trapezoidal one, which I'm not convinced about for this design, because that's obviously so linear. It might look better with a straight edge using that rectangular bridge, but either way I need to determine the offset from the edge of the bridge to the start of or the end of the resin, if you like, whichever way you want to look at it. So I'm going to have a think about that and get this marked up. So I've decided that that's going to be the cut line, so that's going to stay in timber, that's going to be resin. Not a great deal of logic to it really. I like the way that sits on there. We've got a 15mm gap between the edge of the bridge and the start of the wood, which will also work out quite nicely to give us a 15mm margin all the way around. And just by chance, that gives me on the rear bout, that is a third and that is 2/3, but that's just the way it worked out. I don't know what length, they're going to be lipstick pickups supplied by Green Pickups. I don't know what length the casings are, but they'll be no bigger, I'm guessing, than a standard P90 cover. They could even be Strat size, but either way we've got plenty of room in here to fit the pickups. If I do go with this trapezoidal bridge, it'll still work quite nicely, and I'm not too concerned about the smaller gap there, but I think we'll probably stick with the rectangular bridge. So I need to mark on a 15mm margin using this little Heath Robinson gizmo. Bring back the Luddites, I say. So hopefully you can see that. That will remain in wood. This area will be reduced so that the resin plate, which I've not decided on the thickness yet, probably about 6mm, will sit just flush or fractionally higher than the outer perimeter. And then I now need to think about making a template to that shape that I can make this cut out with. That'll be for another day now. Not done much work with resin, so I'm going to cast a few test pieces which I can use for machining and drilling, just to see how it goes, and also try 2 or 3 different colours, because Asa wanted purple. That says it's fuchsia pink, but it might be close enough. We shall see. Can't even work the scale yet. I tried this before and measured it by eye, it just didn't work. You need to, when all else fails, follow the instructions. "100 grams of resin, 45 of hardener." Always wear overalls and a rubber glove. Good mix. Got quite a decent working time on it, probably about 10-15 minutes, temperature dependent I suppose. This particular resin is suitable for up to 10mm thick. The stuff just gets everywhere if you're not careful. Spot of colour. I was going to wear rubber gloves and now I've got it on my hands. That's a latex mould I made ages ago for a pickup ring. As I've got a bit surplus, why not cast a pickup ring? Can leave them to go off tonight. Two clear and two fuchsia pink. Fuchsia pink ring, bit overfilled. Glass cast 1050. They need covering so there's no dust gets on them, and then we can have a look at them tomorrow. It's been a while since we looked at this Asa's guitar. Last time I was looking at resin samples, they all turned out fine. You can machine it, route it, drill it really well, and it polishes up very well. This has kind of all been superseded by another video we've done, something about rabbit holes involving a resin pour making control plates. So that's the resin sorted, hopefully. Back to Asa's guitar. I'm not happy with the shape of this panel. This bit here is to the top of the neck pocket is very messy, doesn't work for me. So I want to follow the outline of the body more. So all of that being said, I've made a template, that's a router template, that will be the size and shape of the new resin panel. So it will sit roughly like so. This will be in timber in this alder body, and it'll be carved back. The panel will be recessed, and there'll be about a 22mm margin all the way around, panel recessed into it, with a shadow gap of probably about 2mm between the edge of the new resin and the wood of the guitar body. So I now need to make a template to give me this 20mm margin all the way around and route out the body. At the same time, I need to make a latex mould to cast the top. The top will be reinforced with Nomex, like we saw in the previous video doing the control plates. So the mould will have to be slightly bigger so that Nomex overhangs the final shape, and then it'll be cast slightly oversized and then trimmed to the correct profile. Dead easy, and should take me all of half a day. I've just made the former, or the template for the mould, which is the white piece. As you can see, it's slightly bigger. That's my router template for the finished resin, and that's the template for making the mould. I've painted it, and I'll rub that up with wet and dry just so it has a nice shiny surface and doesn't stick in the mould. You've got to think about, when you make your mould, which way around you want it, that way or that way, because you can have the finished visible surface can either be the base of the mould or the top of the poured resin. There's not really a right or wrong way to do it, but you can get a slightly different finish, and I'm not quite sure which way around I'm going to do this, but what I'm saying is the whole process is handed, and you have to think about whether you want it right or left, and that's not a right-handed or left-handed guitar. That's the way the finished piece is going to pop out of the mould. I've made up this very Heath Robinson frame for pouring the latex in. My template sits in like that, and the whole lot will be covered with latex. This is, I think I mentioned earlier, I've made this oversize as it's not really possible to trim the Nomex sheet to exactly the correct shape. So I need to put the Nomex in over big, which is about 15mm all around the perimeter, and then the final plate will be machined using that template. So I'll get on now and pour the mould. That's the mould making stuff. 100 grams of that to 5 grams of that. Wear gloves, it's a nightmare. It's going to want quite a lot to fill this, probably about 500 grams. It's interesting that the latex is so sensitive, so you could put any delicate pattern or whatever you wanted on, because this will be the top surface, and it will come through. It will be visible on the finished cast, on the finished mould, which will then transfer to your cast resin. I've rubbed the white template all over with a mould release wax, just so it doesn't stick. Although usually they come out quite easily because the latex is really flexible once it's been mixed. That's the finished pour. Took about 1.5 tins, I think they're 1 kilo tins. So I'll leave that now for at least 24 hours, then strip the frame off and release the template. This has been left 48 hours. It's always best to leave it at least longer than 24 hours, I find, whether it's the latex or the resin. Nice and solid, time to get it stripped down. Fillet in a fish. So there we have one latex mould. That is the template, so as you can see there's a bit of a margin all the way around. I shall cut the Nomex to fit that and then pour the resin. I'm using a much thinner Nomex for this one. It's about 2mm. Very flexible. I suspect this is going to be tricky to cut accurately, even though I've got a bit of a margin on it. Need to cut inside the incline. The problem is it stretches as you hold it. There we go. That didn't fit as well as anticipated. So the way the mould's been cast, the down face, if that's what we call it, that will be the top face when it's fitted to the guitar. It could have been done the other way, such that the top cast surface was the finished guitar surface, but I've chosen to do it the other way around in this instance. And if I'd been able to work something out, I could have done some sort of pattern or design in the surface of the mould, which would have then been imprinted into the resin. So that will be poured with about 1 millimetre or 2 of resin, the Nomex dropped into it, and then that'll be left to cure, and then it'll be topped up to the finished thickness 24 hours later. Of course, it goes without saying this needs to be spotlessly clean, otherwise it'll pick up any dust or whatever, and it's only been exposed about 8 minutes and it's already full of crap. I'll leave it like that for now. While I was fooling about making the mould, I also decided to cast a resin sample because I still can't decide what colour to do the top. So I've done a sample which is clear resin. The mould was dusted with copper powder. It's a really fine powder, about as fine as flour. And then I added some copper powder to the mix, and we've got this sort of very, well, bronze looking, not copper looking piece of resin. Stuck fast. I also cast, because I had a bit of surplus, a spare pickup ring. You can never have too many pickup rings. I've done these before with the metal powder and they worked really well. So once I've freed that off, I'm going to try buffing it on the buffing machine and see what sort of a finish we get. And if I like it, I think I will do a copper plate on the top of the guitar, and then the wooden body will be finished in a distressed black nitro. This is all just dicking about, experimenting really, using a 400 grit on the downward mould face. See what happens. We're already getting a very coppery shine appear. That's quite interesting. I don't know what will happen on that face. Perhaps try a rougher grit. It's a 240. And the 400. Yogurt pots, can't have enough of them. Some interesting swirls starting to appear. shall rub that up a bit more and then we'll put it on the buffing machine. So this has had 180, 240, 400 and 600 wet. The copper side is looking very coppery. I've also taken off all the sharp edges so it doesn't tear the polishing mop, and now we shall buff it. This is a great bit of kit. Buffing machine, that's a pig's tail. I don't know whether you can say that anymore, is that offensive to pigs? Left hand thread. We'll try the medium wheel first. In case you were wondering or worried, no pigs were harmed in the making of this video. Now the fine wheel. Well, that's worked really well in my opinion. I'm pleased with that. I don't know whether you can see it in the light. It's got a mottled coppery appearance. That's the downside, the face in contact with the mould, which is the face, which will be the top face. The other side, it's sort of, I don't know, a browny bronzy look, and you can see a very faint mottled copper pattern, which will be the copper powder being exposed as I've sanded it within the depth of the resin, and there's some heavier pieces here. I guess you could carry on sanding that surface and you'd expose more. You might get areas where the powder is clumped together and it's a bit thicker. Could be interesting, but I'm really liking that surface. It's giving me what I had in mind. There's a couple of patches on there as well where the resin is showing through, more that colour than this larger copper area. And then once I've decided what pickups I'm going to use, if I wanted to, I've got a choice of having contrasting pickup rings made in resin. You know, there's loads of options, or just regular pickup rings if you want to be totally boring. So I think that's the way forward, and I shall now powder the mould first and then mix up some resin and cast the first layer. Light may be better outside, even though it's just started raining. Yes, it is. Look at that, nice and coppery. Keeping the pound shopping business. All very scientific. I need to do an experiment with spray mount to see whether I can spray the mould with adhesive, or whether the adhesive will just end up remaining in the mould and not on the resin. This copper powder has got chunks in it, which you can crush them, but I don't want to get any in the mould. Of course, my cheap brush is now shedding bristles everywhere, so we'll abandon that. Amateur mistake, because new brushes usually do that anyway. Mould all dusted, 180 grams of resin with added copper powder. And I want just about, I don't know, a millimetre or two of depth all the way around, bit difficult to spread it because I don't want to disturb the copper dusting on the bottom of the mould. It does flow. And then I've got to try and bury the Nomex in it without disturbing the powder. Mine will be the tools all covered in resin. That's looking to be the right quantity. I just need to get it fully spread out. Got plenty of working time on it though. You could push it with a hairdryer, but again, it might well blow the powder out of the mould. This blade is just floating on the top of the resin, which is really useful. Well, I will of course be casting yet another pickup ring with any surplus. If anybody wants a free sample, just drop me an email and I'll post you one out.
You got a toilet in there?
Yes, mate.
You got a toilet in here?
Yeah, through there. Not a customer, just somebody wanting to use the bog. It's amazing, isn't it? This is the tricky bit. So I need to make sure it's flat and hasn't got any humps in it. Otherwise it'll look terrible. It's going to be so much trouble if I get resin on this hairdryer. This is carbon fibre. Interesting stuff. It also conducts electricity. He says, come on, Veep. So I was thinking I might bury that in the resin and it'll provide very good shielding if I do something similar in the bottom of the guitar. Although it might be a step too far making a neat job of it, we shall see. The big reveal. This is polyethylene sheet, really good stuff because nothing sticks to it. Or if it does, it comes off very easily. Need to keep that flat. And pour in my next coat. The idea is that could be sandwiched in there and provide the necessary shielding to the top. It won't be seen externally when it's finished. I've decided to go with carbon fibre cloth rather than sheet. It's easier to work with. thin layer of resin, then we'll bury the cloth. This could turn out very messy. I don't think they'll have me making racing cars anytime soon. That's just a bit of copper foil with a wire soldered to it. I want to top this off now, just so the cloth is buried. I'm not looking for any great thickness. There should be enough strength in what we've already got. And then it will need leaving 48 hours before I take it out of the mould. This whole cloth and wire thing may be a bad idea because that wire is going to get in the way before everything is assembled. But it's an experiment. We'll see how we go on. Probably going to need another mix on that as well. I don't want it too thick because I need to keep the weight down. That's it, all done. I'm going to cover that for 48 hours now, and then we'll take it out of the mould. The great reveal. One oversized copper dusted control panel or plate, guitar top. There it is in all its glory. That needs trimming to size and then polishing. You can just see the honeycomb pattern showing through. It's also weirdly got two rather large rings as if a mug's been placed on top of it, but obviously that's not possible. So on the face of it, I'm quite pleased with that. It's flat. I just need to cut it with a router now, and we'll see how we get on with that, and then polish it up. And the mould can be used again and again. I cut it roughly to size on the bandsaw, and it will now be trimmed with the router. I don't want to put double-sided tape on it because I'm bothered it sticks so strongly it might well pull the copper powder off the top, and that would be a disaster. And you need good dust extraction because the particles that come off it seem to end up being statically charged and they stick to everything, including me. I'm going to try polishing it now. 600 wet and dry. Turned out quite well. I'm sort of quietly pleased about that. It's been rubbed up with 600 wet and dry, obviously wet, and then given a fine polish on the buffing machine. You can see the honeycomb in it, and you've got a really nice coppery line all the way around the perimeter, and the copper is quite evident in the surface. I think it'll look even better when the whole thing's finished and it's probably got a coat of clear gloss lacquer on it. It should really pop then. I'm thinking now, I wished I'd paid more attention in chemistry when I was a kid, or alchemy as it was called in my day, to know what to use to age the copper to get a verdigris colour on it. It'll be some horrible acid. If anybody out there knows, please let me know. Next stage is to make a template to cut out the body, make that pretty much completely hollow with a lip, an internal lip, so that the plate will sit on it and sit flush with the top of the timber. But that is for another day. For the anorax out there, it's 434 grams, or in old money, we are, it's telling me that's £15, that's obviously not right. Work it out, I think the grams is correct, and it's about 5 or 6 mil thick without putting the calipers on it. So the amount of wood that is removed will be considerably heavier than the additional plate. So all in all, it should make for a reasonably light guitar. I also need to work out whether I should put in some cross braces, because I don't want this to sag under its own weight. Well, I don't think it will. It's quite strong having the Nomex in it and the carbon fibre mesh. So comments please, let me know what you think, and look out for another video further down the line when the body is fabricated and the guitar's put together. When you cast the resin, as I explained before, you've got to choose which face you want to be visible. So this is in essence the back face, but the top surface, when you're pouring it into the mould, you end up with quite a heavy meniscus all the way around, which obviously sets and goes hard. You don't want that. That's going to prevent your plate from sitting flat. So I've chiselled and then sanded it off on the back. Doesn't matter what it looks like because it's not going to be seen. Although some would say it does matter what it looks like, and that's not the attitude. You can debate that one. Making the body route template out of a sheet of 9mm MDF, cut roughly to shape with a jigsaw and then trimmed up on the drum sander using different diameter drums. It's easier to do all the trimming with the biggest diameter, which I think is about 75mm. But obviously you can't use that for all of the curves. It gets too tight in here, so you've got to drop down to the smaller diameters. The only other issue with this sort of kit is I've never been able to find any sanding drums that are finer than 120 grit. So if anybody out there knows of any, it doesn't matter doing templates, but it'd be better to have something finer doing bodies. It's possible to use the drum sander to trim the body to your final profile, or a guitar body to your final profile, without using a router and a template, although I prefer the router method. All in all, a great bit of kit. That's it done. It's been sanded to size. Normally what I do with these is rub the router, the bearing face, where the router bearing is going to run, I rub it up with super glue so it kind of hardens the inner face, and then I lacquer the tops and the backs because it keeps the moisture out and helps the router really slide on the top surface. You've got to be careful when you come up with ideas for stuff like this. You don't want to be designing in problems. For instance, you know, there's no point in having a 3mm radius curve here because you can't buy a 3mm radius bearing guided router bit. In fact, a lot of the stuff you get is imperial, so you've got to be either 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch. You've got to be aware of that. And I've sort of made a bit of an amateur mistake here in that the template, the original template, and that's the finished size of the resin plate, has got an angular corner there, which is very difficult to reproduce here. So what I've got here is a curved corner. So there's a slight mismatch, but all I will do is round that corner off on the finished piece of resin, and I'll do it on this also so that any future pieces have the correct curve on. And it fits quite nicely. We'll move the camera in a second. I was after a sort of 2 to 3 millimeter gap all the way around. There's no right or wrong to this. You could make the gap a lot bigger, you could have it 5 mil. It all depends what you want the finished guitar to look like. I think you've got to be careful. You don't want the gap too tight, otherwise it'll just fill up with gunk as the guitar's getting used. But the finished plate will sit slightly proud of the guitar body, so the gap should work quite nicely. It's a decent shadow gap. That's the original MDF template for cutting the resin, laid within the body route template. And always make sure you transfer your centre lines both to the top face and to the inner face of the template. And there it is with the finished resin plate. I wouldn't normally carve the back of the guitar at this stage, but it's a lot easier to clamp the workpiece before I've hollowed out the front, and there's no way I want to be clamping onto the new resin top if that was fitted. The whole thing's just done by eye, whatever I feel like. There's no drawing or plan. Done with a bunch of different rasps, carving chisel, and then some heavy duty 80 grit or 120 grit sandpaper. Some of the rasps like these are from Crimson, really good actually. I don't know why I said it like that, because all his tools are good. That's Japanese. There's loads of different types. There's another Crimson one. And that's probably my favourite Crimson rasp. I've got to make a second template now. The bigger one is for the outer perimeter lip. And then this one will be for the inner route where the guitar body is cut out full depth. This smaller one doesn't have to be quite so accurate because none of it's going to be seen. But then again, that's not the attitude, is it? The body's roughly hogged out on the drill press, and then using the new templates, it'll be all cleaned out and routed nice and neat. Routing the recess for the plate to sit in. Something along those lines, I think.